has territorial.
Hello everybody, you're watching World 360 on CNN News 18. I am Aisha Varma. Over the next half an hour, we'll get you all of the major international stories of the week. Our main focus is going to be on the latest in Ukraine. Europe's largest nuclear plant was disconnected from the power grid, but fortunately it was reconnected. And the nation celebrated its Independence Day this week, while the war hit an unfortunate milestone. This is going to be our focus this evening on World 360, but before that deep dive, here's a look at the headlines. The war-torn nation of Ukraine celebrated its Independence Day on August 24th, and incidentally, it was also the day that marked 6 months of Russia's invasion. The United States delegation visited Taiwan amid massive tension with China over U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's visit on the 2nd of August. NASA's most powerful rocket, the Artemis One, will be launching on Monday to take part in an exciting and significant moon mission. Let's take a look at a report on the developments when it comes to the war in Ukraine.
It's been over 180 days of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Remember, the war began on February 24th. On August 24th, the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's declaration of independence from the Soviet Union was celebrated, and Ukraine wasn't the only one to celebrate their independence. There was a march in Rome.
Together we are power. We are very big power. And I believe that this power make really very big magic, and we fight snakes and enemies and fight Russians. And I believe that on the next year I stand on Khreshchatyk, my motherland, my Kiev.
Thousands of Ukrainians took part in Independence Day rallies in Warsaw and other cities in Poland, demanding that Russia be internationally named as a terrorist state.
Today, for me, there is no celebrating because it's very hard day. As I feel there would be no independence without our heroes, so we should dedicate this day to our heroes.
Kosovo hung Ukrainian flags on official buildings in its capital. And hundreds of Ukrainians living in Israel, along with supporters, marked the Ukrainian Independence Day in Tel Aviv. President Volodymyr Zelensky told Ukrainians that their independence will never end, as the country's Independence Day came to a close. But it was a somber celebration because this wasn't just the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's independence. It was also the devastating milestone of 6 months of Russia's invasion. And one major development beyond all of the bloodshed is that Europe's largest nuclear plant in Zaporizhia was disconnected from the power grid earlier this week. But fortunately, it was reconnected amid worry that Ukraine was one step closer to a nuclear disaster. When it had disconnected, this is what Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had to say.
I want to emphasize that the situation remains precarious and dangerous. Any repetition of yesterday's events, that is, any disconnection of the station from the grid or any action by Russia that could trigger the shutdown of the reactors, will once again put the station one step away from disaster. That is why it is essential that the International Atomic Energy Agency mission arrives at the station as soon as possible and helps to keep the NPP under permanent Ukrainian control.
Meanwhile, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has signed a decree ordering an increase in his country's armed forces by 137,000.
Now let's take a look at some of the visuals of the war that have made waves over the last few months, essentially since the war began. Now, the first visual that we're going to take a look at, visual is from February, and it marks the beginning of the chilling war. As dawn broke over Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, air raid sirens were heard, and it's a moment that won't be forgotten. There were a series of explosions in multiple cities of Ukraine. Now, the next visual that we're going to show you is this essentially happened in Lviv. Now, explosions and attacks are still taking place today, but this particular visual, this is from March, where serial blasts took place in Lviv. Now, in these visuals, you can see smoke and flames engulf the city. Now, the next visual, which we want to show you, are a little bit horrific, essentially quite horrific, actually. So these horrific visuals are from Bucha, which is the town neighboring Kyiv, and they came to light in April. Hundreds of bodies in mass graves were found in this town, and there were even satellite images that showed the extent of brutality by the Russian troops in Bucha. Now, around 300 people were found with their hands tied behind their backs in a mass grave in a churchyard. Now, in May, Russia increased its offensive. That's the next visual that we're going to show you. Now, essentially what happened is that Russia made a furious push to capture key regions, Donetsk and Luhansk, located in the Donbas region. And a few days ago, Zelensky said that Ukraine would take Donbas and Crimea, whatever the path may be. Now, remember, Russia is still fighting to take full control of the Donbas region. Now, in June, the next visual that we're going to show you, essentially, June saw a Russian missile hit a crowded mall which was located in the eastern city of Kremenchuk. Now, videos that were shared on social media showed the mall engulfed in flames and huge plumes of smoke rising up to the sky. And that's what you can see on your screens right now. Now, the next visual that we're going to show you essentially is a visual that came to light in July when Russian missiles hit an apartment building and a resort near Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa. Over 15 people were killed and dozens were injured. And then in August, of course, Ukraine celebrated their Independence Day amid the horrific war. Now, India, for the first time on August 24th, voted against Russia about Ukraine. The procedural vote was about letting Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky address a meeting through a video conference. Beyond this, India's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ruchira Kamboj, made a statement to mark the occasion. Listen in.
I also join my foreign minister in conveying our greetings today to the people of Ukraine on the occasion of their Independence Day. As we meet to mark 6 months since the beginning of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, India is ready to dispatch its 12th consignment of humanitarian aid to Ukraine. India remains deeply concerned over the situation in Ukraine. The conflict has resulted in loss of lives and countless miseries for its peoples, particularly for women, children and the elderly, with millions becoming homeless and forced to take shelter in neighboring countries. In terms of diplomacy, India continues to advocate for an immediate cessation of hostilities and an end to violence. We encourage talks between Ukraine and Russia. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has himself more than once spoken to them in this regard.
Shifting focus now, United States Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan on August 2nd, and what followed was a spate of what China called military drills near the Taiwan Strait. But despite China registering their anger over the United States departing from tradition and sending officials to Taiwan, a United States Republican Senator, Marsha Blackburn, met with Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen this week. Now, tweeting out about her arrival to the island, she said, and I quote, "I just landed in Taiwan to send a message to Beijing. We will not be bullied." A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said that the U.S. lawmakers' visit seriously violated the One China principle and other provisions of the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques. Now, CNN News 18's Siddhant Mishra actually traveled to Taiwan to report on the situation. This was earlier this week. And he spoke with Taiwan's Foreign Affairs Minister Joseph Wu about China's growing aggression. Listen into that conversation.
Why do you think that military exercises were done on such a large scale? And what is the motive of China behind doing all this?
This is a very good question. And this question allows us to dig deeper into China's motivation. And the way I say this is that China has a global ambition. And this is the most important motivation for China to continue to expand. Look at the military exercises around Taiwan. It's a large scale, very large scale. Other than the sea and air exercises around Taiwan, they also fired missiles over Taiwan. And they also conducted the cyber attacks. And they also conducted a very large scale disinformation campaign against Taiwan. And if you put all this together, you can see that China has been practicing this for a long time. And that also gives us a preview of what China may do to Taiwan in the future. So this is Taiwan. But if you look beyond Taiwan, you can also see that China has a global ambition. East China Sea, South China Sea, China's military activities have been non-stop. Under these kinds of circumstances, Taiwan, unfortunately, is being put on the spotlight. But we need to watch out because China's ambition is global.
In India also, back in India, in Doklam, in the Leh Ladakh, the area, the borders we share with China, there have been a lot of disturbance in last 1.5 years. So looking at the situation scenario, our situation is same. Even India is also going and is a victim of Chinese aggression. How do you see this, and have you contacted anyone back in India?
We try to explain to friends in India about the situation Taiwan is in, and through that kind of contact, we do know the perspective of India on the cross-strait crisis. And the most important of all, we need to reach out to the Indian friends, regular Indian people. And your visit to Taiwan happens to be a wonderful channel for us to be able to speak directly to the Indian people.
Now, shifting focus, NASA's most powerful rocket, the Artemis One, is all set to launch on Monday between 8:33 a.m. ET and 10:33 a.m. ET. Now, in India, that will essentially mean between 6:03 p.m. to 8:03 p.m. One important thing to note about this mission is that it's unmanned, but it will carry passengers, just not the human kind. Now, these include yeast, algae, fungi, and seeds, and these items are being carried so that their interactions with the deep space environment can be observed. Now, the Artemis One will circle the moon in an orbit, and then it will return to Earth after around 42 days. Artemis One is the first in a series of new moon missions, which will hopefully culminate in a manned landing in 2025. Now, CNN's Rachel Crane is joining us from New York City to tell us more. Rachel, can you explain the significance and aim of this mission?
Well, Aisha, NASA has not been back to the moon in over 50 years, and the intention of the Artemis program is to create a sustained presence on the moon. And Artemis 1, this test launch, which is scheduled to take flight Monday morning, it's the first major milestone before we're able to put human beings back on the moon. NASA intends to do that in 2025, and they intend to put the first woman and the first person of color on the moon. But before you can put them on a rocket and inside a spacecraft, you have to make sure that that system is safe. And the SLS rocket, this rocket that is powering the Orion spacecraft, it's never flown before. This will be its maiden voyage, and it's the most powerful rocket that NASA has ever created, even bigger than the Saturn V. When it takes flight, it will have over 8 million pounds of thrust. But this is a 42-day journey, and there's a lot of objectives and milestones that they have to hit in order to deem this a success, one of which is testing the heat shield on the Orion spacecraft. It's the largest one NASA has ever created, and it has to be able to withstand temperatures of, half of those on the moon, over 5,000 degrees. So they have to make sure that that heat shield holds up and will keep the astronauts, once they are on board that spacecraft, safe as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. But so the main objectives are really to demonstrate that this system, that the heat shield, that the ground systems, that the rocket itself, that it all works before they put human beings on board. Now, this mission is just going to sort of slingshot around the moon. It will come within 60 miles of the lunar surface at one point. So, they'll be beaming back photos to us here on Earth, so we'll be able to follow along this incredible journey. But, this is really, Aisha, the first major milestone before we are able to put human beings once again back on the moon. So a lot of excitement, and everyone in the space community rooting for a successful launch.
Absolutely. Now, essentially also in terms of space exploration, how much closer does this mission get us to exploring Mars?
Well, that's a really good question. And this is really the first major, they're looking at the moon as a stepping stone to getting to Mars. So what's so interesting about the moon is that there is ice on the moon, and NASA is aiming to land those astronauts at the South Pole, where we know that there is a lot of ice. Now, ice can be broken down into liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. And you know what that is? That's rocket fuel right there. So essentially, for a deeper space mission like going to Mars, you could potentially use the moon as, a gas station per se, but also, to fuel up to get to the Mars, which is, of course, much further away. But also you can demonstrate the technologies that will be needed for sustained deep space mission like going to Mars. It's much easier to get to the moon. It's just a matter of days versus, 6 to 9 months to get to Mars. So, you can really demonstrate the technology that one would rely on in a Mars mission using the lunar surface and the moon before you put those astronauts on a much riskier mission to Mars. So, of course, this is really just thought of as a major stepping stone and a jumping off point to get to that holy grail of space exploration, putting boots on Mars. Back to you.
All right, Rachel Crane from CNN, thank you so much for speaking to us and giving us all of that information. Now, with that, we're heading into a very short break, but stay with us to learn about some more interesting stories when we come back.